Okay, so here we are in After Effects and I'm in Essential Graphics workspace. Haven't done anything yet, just started it and put it into that workspace. I'm going to go to the project window and import some assets. I'm going to use this background I've made and this car I've prepared with a transparent background. Okay, so now I'm going to make a new composition. So I'm going to go to New Composition and I'm going to set this to 1920 and this one to 1080 because that's the size I want. That's the size of a background image. Frame rate can be 30 and the length of this video can be, let's take 20 seconds to start with. Okay, and now I'm just going to take the background and drag it into this window. Well, I can drag it down here like this. And I don't want this to move around in this video, so I'm going to lock that straight away. Okay, so the next step is to bring the car in. So I've got this car and I'll just drag that into the scene like that. It's underneath the background, so I'm going to just swap the order of those layers around so that we can see it. And I'm going to put the car just here to start with. And we'll just animate this by expanding the transform properties of this layer and selecting position and entering a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch. We then just need to move the car to a new position. So I'm going to just do this. We'll make it move very slowly, 3 seconds to this position here. I can hold down the shift key and just move it to there. And when you do that, it will automatically create another key at the point where you release the mouse after you've dragged it. And you can see these keys, these keyframes indicated in the timeline down here. So this is a very simple animation and we can just test it by resetting the timer and pressing the space bar, and there you go. And when it gets to 3 seconds, of course, it carries on because I made this 20 seconds long. So hit the space bar again and come back here. If you want, you can use the preview controls up here to play the animation. And this can be more useful because you can click on these to send it to the beginning and at the end very quickly, and you can advance it by 1 frame at a time, like this. Well, that looks okay, but perhaps what we could do to make it look a bit more interesting is animate some parts of this car. Now, we can't really change anything on the car because it's on one layer. What we can do is separate things from the car and animate them. Now, if I wanted to animate the wheels wobbling around, for example, I'd have to go back to like Photoshop or whatever and edit out those wheels and bring them in as separate assets. So I'm not going to do that here, but what we're going to do instead is animate some smoke. So I'm going to bring in some smoke. Smoke. There we go. And we can just have a look at that, what it's going to look like if we bring it in. It's like just a cloud of smoke. And we want that coming out the back of the car. So, 2 problems. The first is we've got to somehow attach this smoke to the car so that it follows the car, because if I play the animation now, that smoke's just going to stay there. So that's the first problem. How do we attach it to the car? And the second problem is we want to somehow animate this smoke to make it look more realistic. So we'll start with that second problem. We'll animate the smoke, and there are various ways we can approach animating something like this. We could do something with the scale, kind of vary the scale a little bit and vary the opacity to create an effect of smoke. But whatever we do, this animation of the smoke is going to need to go in its own composition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new composition in here using the smoke as a basis for it. So I'm going to right click on here, new comp from selection, and there we've created this new composition with its own timeline and the smoke that just fits into the composition window. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create the animation inside this composition. And the first thing to do is to move this reference point. You can probably just see this like crosshairs in the middle of the composition there. That is called the anchor point, and it's the center of all the transformations that take place. So if I rotate this, it will rotate around that point. And if I scale it, it will scale from that point. I don't want it to scale from the center. I want it to scale from here where the exhaust comes out. So I'm going to use the pan behind button to select and move the anchor point to where I want it to be. And now I can start animating that. So I'm going to go down to the layers here, and I'm going to change the scale first. So I can enter a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch, and then I type in the scale that I want it to start at. Try 10%. Now I need to decide how much time elapses before it reaches its full size, and I'm going to put it at 2 seconds to start with. We'll see what that looks like. So now I can enter a new keyframe there. I'm going to do this manually just by clicking on that little dot there and enter 100% again. So now this animation, if I rewind it and play it, you can see that it's scaling from the right point. I also want to scale the opacity, because as this gets bigger, I want it to fade away. So I'm going to click, we're right at the beginning again. I'm going to enter a new keyframe at the start on the opacity property, and then I'm going to move it to this 2-second position. Now to get there, I could drag this and kind of hope it's on that line, on that time, 2 seconds, or I could jump to that keyframe. Because it's already there, I can use this control on the scale to jump to that keyframe. And now I know I'm there, I can go to the opacity property and enter a keyframe and lower the opacity. This time I want it to almost disappear. Let's try that. So there, it's getting bigger and fading away. One more time. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the main composition now. It's called Comp 1 because I never gave it a name. I'll change that later, but just going to go back in there now. And you can see that that cloud that I brought in before is still there. We're not going to use that, or cloud of smoke I should say. We're not going to use that. So I'm just going to select that and press delete to get rid of it. And instead I'm going to bring in the composition smoke. So we'll just drop that right at the top, just above the car. And you can just see it there. It's scaled down to 10%. If I press play, it should scale up as the car moves at the same time. Yeah, there you go. So now we've got some kind of an animation. It's not perfect, this smoke animation, but we can work on that later. What I want to do next is attach it to the car. And the way we can do that is by just moving it into the right position where we want it to start. There is no exhaust pipe on this car, but it's going to be somewhere around there. Once you've got it in that position, we need to click on this parent and link drop down menu for the smoke. If you can't see that, just right click on the bar above the layers there, and where it says columns, just make sure that that parent and link setting is clicked or ticked, and then with the smoke you can link it to the car like that. And if you press play now, you'll see that the smoke is following the car. Now obviously that animation is not complete, it's growing to a certain size and then just staying there, so we need to do some more work on that, and that's what we're going to be doing next. Okay, moving on to the next stage. I've saved the animation that I've done so far, the project. Always a good idea to save different versions of a project that you're working on quite often in case you need to fall back to an earlier version. So I save that, and now I've come back into this smoke composition, and what I'm going to do is work a little bit more on this animation. Now, as I said earlier, there's various ways we can animate this smoke, but what my idea with this is to move to about halfway through the animation and then make another puff of smoke start animating, and so on, and somehow create some kind of cyclic animation with puffs of smoke appearing and fading away. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to need at least 2 clouds of smoke here, and that means I'm going to have to be putting these settings in again. So we don't do that. What we do in After Effects when we need to repeat settings and do repetitions of things is we create something called a preset. So I'm just going to make sure this transform layer is selected here, and then I'm going to go to animation, save animation preset, and I'll just call this exhaust. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in the smoke asset again. I can put it underneath, and instead of having to do all those animation keyframes again, I can just go to animation, apply animation preset, and get that exhaust thing, and there it is. It's applied it, and if I press play, you won't really see anything happening because both animations are playing on top of one another. But what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to try to move the keyframes of one of the animations so that they're slightly, so that they're out of phase. So if I zoom in here a little bit, let's get this a bit, about there. You can see that the keyframes are there. I'm going to drag a box around those keyframes, and I'm going to move them so that they start at the 1 position. Is that there? I think so. Now, if I play the animation, you can see that we've got 1 starting after 1 second. There is a bit of a problem with it because that cloud just hangs there for the first second, not doing anything. If you watch it again, you can see it there, it's just stationary and doesn't look very realistic. And the way we can fix that is to change the visibility of that cloud, and don't make that cloud visible for the first second. We'll just have a cloud appear here. We can drag this visibility bar to do that. Oops, I didn't get it right there. This visibility bar there. So now, when we press play, we've got the cloud appears at that point. So we're about halfway there now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this again. Save as. Just going to give it a number 2, save. Okay, let's go back to the main composition now and see what's happening. So you can see that the effect is improving, and we just need to make that white cloud appear 1 more time. And that's the tricky bit, because we've got to try, we can't keep adding steps all the way through. We've got to make it cyclic. So we'll have a look at how we can do that next. Now, if you watch the animation, you'll see that it's not quite correct for the first second, because in the first second, we should see a larger cloud that's already fading away here. That's what's missing. The only part of this animation that's right is from the first second to the end. That's correct. But what we need to do is add another layer with smoke. Wait a minute. We'll just drag that down there. So we add another layer with smoke. But this layer has to start at 50% at the beginning. It's a bit tricky to do. Let's see if we can do it. I'll just collapse these layers 1 and 2 so we can see what's going on here. I need to apply the preset to this layer I've just brought in. So there we go. And I've actually put yeah, so let's just get these back at the beginning. So really what we want to do is we need to add another keyframe in the middle, like this. We need to get rid of these. And then we need to put this one at the start like this. And that should produce the cycle effect. Let's just see if it does it. I'll just drag it through. You can see it's when it starts now, we've got this cloud at 50%. And as we go through it, we end up with this cloud at 50% and we get this repetition that we wanted. So the first second is correct, and the second is correct. So at this point, this is where that white cloud should appear again. So we just need to try this out now on the main composition. When you feel like you've achieved something that's working, it's a good point to save it. So before I do that, I'm just going to save it again and give it another number. We'll call this number 3. And okay, I'm going to go back to the main composition again. And let's drag this and see what's happening. Now it's starting to look quite good. Now if I can make it start cycling after 2 seconds, then we should have the effect that we were looking for. Okay, so I'm going to go back to smoke now and shorten this to where we want it to be, which is 2 seconds. Composition settings, and we'll just change that to 2. Going back to the composition now. What we need to do now is make it loop. And to do that, we select the composition layer with the smoke, go to Layer, Enable Time Remapping. That gives us 2 keyframes that allow us to remap the time. But it also gives us something else. It gives us this stopwatch. And if we hold down the Alt key and click on the stopwatch, we can type in an expression for the time. And an expression is just like a command that you give to the a script command that you give to the application. It tells it to do something. In this case, we want to write loop out, which makes it repeat. When you've written this, don't press the enter key because it'll just put you on a new line. To make this get accepted, just click on somewhere on the timeline up there, and it jumps in there and it will work. Let me just try this now. Let's see what happens. Well, it's working, it's cycling the way I wanted it to. but it looks like it's skipping a frame there. It looks like there's a blank frame in there, and that often happens when you're using this loop out function. The way to fix it is to go to the last frame, because it's usually the last frame that's doing it. You can see there's nothing there. If I go frame by frame, if I go one step back, you can see the smoke there. And there's smoke on every frame except for that last frame, look. So an easy way to fix it is to just move the time bar one frame to the left, and then enter a new keyframe there for time mapping. So we click on this one and enter a new keyframe, and then go to that one and just delete it like that. And now if we go, you can see that there's no blank frame now. It's still jumping a bit. So there's still a few things that can be tweaked and fixed here. I'm going to go back to the smoke because I saw something that I forgot to do. If we switch off these layers one by one, we can look at them individually and see what's happening. So that's the first one, the first layer, and we see that grow all the way from 0 to 2 seconds, and it stays at 10% opacity. That could be what's causing it to look a bit jumpy in the main composition, because it goes from 10% to 0. There's no gradation, it just jumps. So it could be that. But there is something else here. This last line looks wrong. Let me go on to the second layer and see what's happening. We have no visibility for that layer at the start, and then at 1 second it kicks in a little cloud and it gets big, and it stops at 50%, which is what we want. We look at the last layer. That starts at 50%, so it's a continuation of where the second layer left off. So it's continuing that, and as we move along here, we see that get stuck at 1 second. So we need to stop the visibility of this, otherwise it's just going to hang there. So that should improve things a little bit. I'll turn those layers back on now so we can see them all, and go back to the main composition, and we'll just play that and see what it looks like. I think that looks okay. What we could also do is remap the time a little bit more. We could bring these two keyframes together to make the exhaust come out a little bit faster. And I think if we do that, we won't see that jump as much. Another thing we could also do is we could go back to the smoke composition and maybe get rid of that 10% that we left behind and make it go down to 0%. That will probably make it look a lot smoother. But let's remap the time for this. I'll just go back to the start. So there are the two keyframes for the looped animation. It's doing it over 2 seconds. If I just slide this down to a new position and play it again, and you can speed it up. So we could even get it down to maybe half a second, see what that looks like. And you can see when you speed it up, it doesn't look so so strange with it, with the jump in the animation. Let's speed the car up a bit now as well. So let's which one do we want? Car layer. I'm going to move the position a little bit more to the right, so it starts off the screen. Try that again. And we need to move it to the left so it disappears off the screen as well. Right now it's just stopping there, so we can just drag this like this. Get rid of the smoke as well, everything disappears. There we go. Try that again. That doesn't look too bad. Okay, so this is a good time to save it again. So I'm going to save as, give it an explicit new name, number 4. So I could end the tutorial here, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to do one more thing with this. That car animation is reusable. What we could do with it is we could not have this as our main composition at all. We could just get rid of the background. I'll just unlock it first. And now we've got this car with smoke on a transparent background. Now I could end the tutorial there, but there is one more thing I thought we could do with this to show you a good way of working in After Effects. And that is, I'm not going to use this as the main composition. I'm going to take the whole car and the smoke as a reusable animation. So I'm just going to just get rid of this background first of all. I need to move the car a little bit more because we can still see the smoke there. Let's just drag that way a little bit more. Okay, we'll just save that. I'm going to rename this composition now. So rename, and we'll call it Car with Smoke. So that's a reusable animation that we can use as many times as we want. We don't have to worry about animating all the smoke and the looping and everything. And I'm going to make a new composition as well. That looks all right. I don't need to do anything there. Just put the name in. We'll call this main. Put the background in it. And now the car with the smoke is actually going to be a nested composition, and it's got the smoke nested in it. So I'm going to bring this in now. We'll have to go on top of the background, and we need to lock that background as well. And now if I press the play button, we've got this car, and we can use this car as many times as we want. Oh, we can still see some smoke there. So let's go back into the car with smoke. Let's see what's happening there. It's kind of getting stuck here and then repeating the smoke. Also, we need to shorten this as well. We don't need it to be 20 seconds long because it's just a short animation. So we can take it to just over 5 seconds. Let's go to composition settings and shorten that to 5. And then we just need to move it a little bit at the end there. I'm not sure where that keyframe has come from, but it's probably one I put in accidentally. It's this one we want, so... And we need to move the car a little bit more that way, so we don't see this the smoke. Let's try that. Okay, so that's the animation. Go back to the main. And now we can use that animation wherever we want. So for example, we can make the car come back from the other direction by reusing that. So if I bring it in again, car with smoke, I can put it on top, and I'm going to do something to that layer. I'm going to transform the layer by flipping it horizontally. We should see the car now coming from the other direction, and I can move that a little bit over here, so gives the impression that the car is coming back. Let's see if that works. So there it is, coming back again. So we've got this reusable animation now with all that complex smoke animation embedded into it, and we can just use that wherever we want. And it's very easy to edit as well. If you wanted to add a sound effect to it, you could just drop a sound effect into that composition and that would work. So a very good way of working, saves you a lot of time. And that's about it for this video. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you all again soon.